I'm very concerned about the readiness aspect of the people in the First Nations, Indigenous communities, and especially in Nunavut. And I'd just like to read, if you don't mind, a brief that we received last Friday from Mr. Shuyuk, Isaac Shuyuk from Arctic Bay. Number one, marijuana will be disclosed. For many years, the tobacco is used. It can be cancerous to the lungs. It destroys the body. Children very young, they smoke. Today, alcohol is also used a long time. It causes death. There are accidents. There are murders. When alcohol and drugs are used, the RCMP has to kill in order to protect people. These have no benefits to our lives. It has benefits in money in some way. Every year, people die from accidents. Two, this marijuana, when it is disclosed, when people are able to possess, it will have a very big negative impact for people from Nunavut. Children and adults and anyone will start using it when it is legalized. There will be no help available in Nunavut. There's help from RCMP mental health workers, health practitioners, but they have no authority. When you ask for help, they cannot help. Number three, in Nunavut, when there is statistics taken, they say they are the most smokers, most alcohol drinkers. When marijuana is legalized, the lives of Nunavuniat will be very much ruined. There is no healing centers and no rehab centers. We will be a state of risk of safety. Children will start smoking. Their lives will be ruined. If it is not legalized, it will be better. There are no help available. My question for the officials and the parliamentary secretary here today, is it possible to defer the legalization of cannabis for Nunavut, respecting that there is such a lack of treatment facilities and that will take time to put those in place to be able to protect people? And having done a study on housing in Nunavut a few years ago, we saw personally the situation where you have very, very severe overcrowding. And if you add to that scene people who are smoking cannabis, it's really going to impact future generations in every possible way. So my big question is it possible under our legislation to delay the implementation for those parts of the country, like the territories, that might wish it to be done?
If I may begin, Senator, I think it's important to acknowledge, and when I met with the health officials and with Inuit organizations in Iqaluit last week, they made it very clear that the rate of cannabis use in their communities and among their young people is at an incredibly high rate. And the cannabis they're using is incredibly expensive, and it's being sold by a criminal enterprise. And so the problem's that it is not, as I've already said, we're not introducing a new drug. We're introducing a new method of controlling this drug. Currently, the only way to keep this out of the hands of kids is to charge them criminally. And that first charge for a young person, far too many young Canadians, the very first encounter or entry into the criminal justice system that they have was as a result of a criminal charge for simple possession of cannabis. And that has a lifelong consequence for those young people. And so working with the government of Nunavut, they were introducing legislation that will allow an absolute prohibition for those young people for cannabis to be enforced by the law enforcement so that the drug can be seized from them, a ticket can be issued. There are consequences, and a prohibition can be enforced, but it doesn't result in the criminalization of those children. And I'm not sure, quite frankly, where the public benefit would be in delaying the implementation of a comprehensive system of regulatory control so that we have now control of the production and distribution of cannabis, a new enforceable prohibition for young people, and the introduction of new education materials working with that government, why we would simply continue to leave the production and distribution of cannabis in the hands of criminals and ignore a totally unacceptable and unhealthy use of cannabis within those communities, particularly among young people, and allow that to continue to perpetuate when there is an opportunity to gain some regulatory control and bring in a far more effective and comprehensive way of enforcing a prohibition among those young people. It also creates an opportunity for the government of Nunavut, as I discussed with their health and justice and finance ministers. It creates an opportunity for them to generate revenue that's currently going into criminal enterprise that can be publicly reinvested in those treatment facilities that currently are absent in those communities.
Just if you don't mind, for clarification, I'm not against legalization of marijuana or cannabis at all, and I agree we need to take a health approach. My question was, can it be deferred for everyone at this point until they are ready? Yes, there's cannabis being used there now. Obviously, the law enforcement officers are not able to deal with it to prevent it from happening. I understand all that. But I want to know, is it possible to defer in any way this legislation from coming into effect in certain parts of the country should they ask for it?
Well, and I can tell you, having met with the government officials, the 3 ministers just this past week, they have prepared and introduced their legislation, which they are confident will be passed and in place. They're very, very proud of the legislative response that they're putting in place. And the indication they gave to me is that they will be ready. And we're doing everything we can to support their readiness, but they have been working with us for almost 2.5 years. They've been meeting with our senior officials, and they have prepared and introduced their own legislation in response to this. And frankly, I've had an opportunity to discuss it with them. I think they've done an exceptional job. And I honestly believe that with the implementation of their territorial legislation, coupled with the provisions available in Bill C-45, they are going to create a much better, safer, and healthier environment for their citizens within their community with this new legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator McPhedran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.